On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, the Oklahoma City Thunder deject the New Orleans Pelicans in Game 3. This series seems over if NBA history tells us anything, but how did the Thunder do it?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. On today's show, we're joined by Michael Martin to discuss game number 3, a historic Locked On Thunder podcast, first time ever on location in a different state, in a new arena, in the Smoothie King Center. The Thunder get a massive Game 3 win. I think that not only is history on their side of no teams ever came back from down 0-3, but you look at how the game took place and the body language of New Orleans. The Pelicans just seem very dejected. They're obviously very depleted, and I think that this series is over, Michael.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I can't see the Pelicans digging themselves out of this hole. Like you mentioned, statistically, never happened. Maybe it'll happen one day. Hopefully not in this series. But I'm with you. I think that they just look completely dejected, just overmatched in this series. And it feels like they're just sort of running out of gas mentally and physically after the stress of going through that season and then really having to get to the play and get here.
It's going to be interesting to see kind of how the Thunder respond yet again in Game 4. Their whole idea this season has been 0-0, and that's been what they've been preaching. It's another opportunity to have a 0-0 mindset because when you look at what they've done today, they've gone up 3-0. If you can win on Monday and just put the series to bed, you then are going to wait on the only competitive series in the Western Conference that sees Dallas up 2-1 on LA, and you're going to have home court advantage. You'll be back. You'll be resting. We'll all be back in Oklahoma. Cannot wait for that to happen, resting as well. But I think that the biggest story of this series and the biggest story of this game, too, has been Lu Dort. I mean, Lu Dort has been the massive reason why the Pelicans are so dejected. Obviously, they were the 8th seed. That's an uphill battle. They don't have Zion. It's another uphill battle. But it's just hard to even get a shot attempt up for Brandon Ingram, much less convert on a defender like Lu Dort. And that trickles down to everyone on the roster. There's no actual facilitator. There's no actual creator who can help free them up. And so I think that Lu Dort deserves all the credit for a team that has held the Pelicans below, 92 points or below in all 3 games. And this one, they don't even crack 90.
Yeah, I would say right now that Lu Dort, I mean, you can go back and forth. I think he's been the most important defender in this series. And Brandon Ingram had a decent game tonight, 19 points, 7 of 14, shooting 2 of 3 from 3. But Dort is just making him work for it. And in the first 2 games, it just felt like a shutdown corner of just saying, like, this guy's just not in the game, so don't even worry about throwing it this way. But he's just been a menace, and the team's really taken on his identity with some of the hustle plays defensively of just going all out.
I think what helps this game get to a back-breaking type of moment is he is just obliterating your offense, and that's frustrating in and of itself. But yet he somehow has the motor to fight through every single screen and to stick to Brandon Ingram like glue. And yet, on the other end, he hits in 4 threes on 8 attempts on his way to 12 points. And so he can do it on both sides of the floor. And just the sheer amount of stamina that takes, much less talent and skill and technique and everything else that takes. I think Lu Dort is going to be one of the unsung heroes of this. You can get lost in the Chet blocks. You can get lost in the Shai highlights. You can get lost in the Josh Giddey game in New Orleans. But Lu Dort, just the practicality of what he's doing, but also how he's doing it is a hats off effort.
This is an archetype that Presti has been sort of searching and chasing for years. We start with Thabo Sefolosha to Andre Robertson to just the mixed bag of guys like Hamidou Diallo, Terrence Ferguson, Josh Huestis, Corey Brewer, and others. And Lu Dort's been the most actualized version of that, and it's been really, really cool to see. And I asked Shai about it after the game about just Lu's development, but going from a two-way guy to then playing in the bubble in Game 7 where they just leave you open to now being a 40% three-point shooter who's just knocked down has been an incredible development.
So while we're going to give Lu Dort a ton of credit, and we'll continue to do that tomorrow in the off day, which will be at our hotel. So it will not be as noisy and weird as this one is, but just wanted to get a pod out there for you. We might even double dip into another pod tonight, or at least I will, to give you a pod that's not as noisy. But regardless, while Lu Dort deserves credit, and he'll get credit all week, especially as you preview the next series, Cason Wallace in this game in particular, for all the talk of experience and all the talk about how young they are and they've never faced these opportunities before, I don't know about you, back in the early part of the season, I kind of bought into, hey, you've got to go through some wars, you've got to go through some battles, and then you can learn how to win, and then you can learn how to take the next step. But the more that you watch this team play, and throughout the 82-game season, the big tagline from the players and from Mark has been that they're uncommon and they have uncommon maturity. The more this team plays, the more they continue to prove that to you. They continue to prove that these things are more than just buzzwords. Like Cason specifically. Here's a guy as a rookie who no one expected J-Dub to get hit in the eye his first drive of the game. You can never game plan for that. And he gets put into the game earlier. He has to play a longer stretch than usual. And he holds everything together for the Thunder and allow them in a messy sort of offensive stretch that he allows them to hang in the game. He allows them to get to the other side and eventually get another dominating win in game 3. And so I think that without the rookie stepping up that way on the road, even though it wasn't a lively crowd, on the road is very tough and is something that makes this team and kind of actualizes what we've been saying with this team all year long.
Just the resolve of this team, and Cason's just sort of like, I guess, the head of the snake when it comes to just what happened tonight. It was really impressive, like you mentioned, of J-Dub jumps out. No one's expecting it. It's kind of like an offensive lineman getting knocked out on the first drive, and you got to throw somebody in there. But Cason and the way the rest of the team operated, they just acted like it was an early sub. It wasn't like somebody got knocked out. It's like, oh, panic, or what are we going to do? This changes our whole game plan. He just fit right in, and they got to work, and it was a little bit slow at first, but then they just started rolling, and then they get dubbed back and really take off.
So I don't want to speak for you. I'm going to let you answer the question. I think that we have the same answer, though. The series is over, right?
Yeah, it's over. It's just a matter of how many games. It's 4 or 5.
And I don't think I think that you're right. I don't think they have any sort of resolve to go past 5. Honestly, maybe this is just, as Mark would say, drunk on the score of the last 2 games, but that's a Pelicans team that looks ready to just kind of pack it in for the year in this game. I mean, you come home, your crowd's not in it. Your crowd's just awful, honestly. You can't get anything going still, and there's no signs of life. You're not bringing Zion back in this series whenever you're down 0-3. Like, he's not coming back. There's no sort of a carrot on the end of the stick there keeping you motivated. So I think that this is going to be a sweep, honestly, on Monday.
I'd agree with you. The only way that this goes 5 is if the Pelicans just get hot early from 3 and just start raining it down. But I'm with you. I think that this team is just mentally and physically done. And if the Thunder throw that first haymaker and get out to a 22-8 lead or whatever it is, I think they can just kind of boat racing.
And you mentioned, we mentioned that J-Dub went out earlier in this game with an injury. He came back, and not only did he come back, he came back aggressively, and he was looking for his shot. And I think that his shot making was a big reason why you gained separation, not only in that second quarter, but fending off the lone pesky Pelicans run in that third to trim it to just 10 points, and then extend the lead out again. And I think that with J-Dub, you're watching a second-year player become this go-to score in the biggest moments, in the biggest stages against a good defensive unit in New Orleans. And I think that you cannot talk about this team without just sounding like a homer, because everything is going the right way. Everything is panning out exactly as imagined. And J-Dub is exactly where he's not exactly where he's supposed to be. He's ahead of schedule, as he's already this prolific scorer in the playoffs, on the road, and helping you build on leads. What did you make of J-Dub's game?
Well, when we get to the playoffs, it's said that it's sort of like a microscope, and it just proves more of who you are. And Dub's showing that he's a future star in this league, in my opinion. And he was awesome tonight. He really brought it. He was getting into some mixes with Larry Nance, Herb Jones, really chirping at those guys. And yeah, I mean, he comes out with that eye injury and comes back, and it's like nothing happened. I was wondering if that would be something that affects his shot or in his game, but yeah, it's tough not to sort of get irrational about how good some of these guys can be, especially the top 3 in Chet, Dub, and Shai.
It's going to be very fun to see how their careers continue to unfold. Coming up, let's talk Josh Giddey in New Orleans. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. We are cleaning the kitchen sink apparently right now at the Smoothie King Center. What did you make of Josh Giddey's game? I think that he will be a big talking point anytime that he plays in New Orleans because he just has a knack for playing well here.
Yeah, 4 of 7 from 3 is the one that really stands out. He was on triple-double sort of watch in the first half. He had 6 rebounds, 6 assists. He ends with 8. And, he didn't have 6 rebounds, he had 5. But, yeah, really great game for him. He didn't look hesitant shooting. He was really attacking some of the closeouts. There was one where Valanciunas just sort of, like, put his arm and just, like, go ahead and shoot that 3. He takes one dribble and goes into that floater. And then he had the great play where he gets a wraparound dribble, a column into a floater. So, it's very nice to see him be able to step up in some of these situations where the other team is really angling for them, where it's like, if you kill us, fine. But to see him really capitalize on that has been really cool.
This is our first and only pod from Arena, I feel like, depending on how this is going to sound on the playback. But with Josh, I think that his physicality stood out the most to me, and the way that he was willing to mix it up, and that is what sparks everything else. And especially in this series where you're going to have some bigger bodies out there, his willingness to give effort and his willingness to be on the glass and his willingness to try to jump entry passes, those things stack up and those things kind of lead to bigger results for the Thunder. I mean, he had a possession where it didn't lead to any actualized points, but you gave this offense 2 opportunities to go score. And this is a top 5 offense in the NBA. So if you generate 2 opportunities to go score, they happen to go 0 for 2 that time, including one where he just saved it at the baseline. They're not going to go 0 for 2 very often, and those things are what make the difference. Those things are what shift series, if you will. So I think that with Josh, not only was he shooting very well, but he played well defensively. I think he's played well defensively for his role. Like, obviously, he's not going to be an all-defensive member, but for his role, I think he's played really well defensively this entire series. Whenever you limit teams to 92 or less points, it's hard to pick out guys who didn't play well defensively. But still, you're seeing how he can become an actualized version of this really good 5th best defender and offensive, weapon for the Thunder if he can play this way, consistently as he really has since March 1st.
Yeah, they've got 4 other elite defenders around him, and my biggest, statement about Josh defensively is it's a really good sign when you don't notice him defensively. When he's on an island and he gets blown by, you're really going to notice that. But if he's just holding his own and making a guy drive and kick out because there's no shot or walling somebody up, that's not going to go on a box score or really be the highlight defensive play of like a Chet block or Lu Dort locking somebody down, but it's just as important.
Josh was awesome. I think that Shai did not have a Shai game. When you look at the box score, it was 40% shooting. It was 24 points, but he had Shai moments, and that was all this team needed, and that's really all any 1 seed needs to be a 1 seed. But the fact that this team is so well-rounded and so deep that like a Shai 24 points on 20 shots, just so abnormal for him, that's enough to get a blowout win in the playoffs is so encouraging for what this team can do both this year and in the future. Like, the game, I don't think will ever bog down completely on the Thunder, even if their superstars not having a MVP, oh my goodness, jaw-dropping night. He did make jaw-dropping plays, though, and one of those was his hop, skip, jump, spin, elbow jumper, which we go back to the word deflating of – it was just deflating for the Pelicans. There's no other way to say it. Like, you look at their body language, and they quit tonight. Like, they just flat out quit today. And I think that will translate into the rest of the series here. I think it'll only last until Monday. But going back to Shai specifically, when I watch Shai, the thing that is always impressive to me is the fact that he never lets results kind of dictate his game. Where you look at game 2, he could have easily came out trying to prove himself, trying to prove he is a playoff level player after a not so kind game 1 or not up to his standard of game 1. He let the game come to him. He initially started out as a top playmaker for the Thunder and allowed them to get to their actions versus trying to score. And in this game, when shots aren't falling or you might miss some ones that you think that you should have made, it's easy to start pressing and start trying to do more and more and more. But if you watch Shai, the quality of shots he takes, like the process that he gets to and the process that he goes through offensively, you would never know just by seeing that if he's having a good game or bad game. You would have to look through the box score to see if the shots were in or out. He never really changes his kind of character on the floor. And I think that a leader like that is what gets you far in the postseason. And this team is capable of it this year.
Yeah, the consistency with him, he's talked about it a lot. My whole life is consistent. We know that. But his mindset when he goes into these games, like he'll miss 5 in a row, hypothetically, and his mindset is, I'm going to make the next 5. So it's not really a big deal for him. And I think that he looks at it a way, I'm not speaking for him, as just like, if I miss, it's on me. If a defender is going to make it tough, but if I miss, it's something I did wrong. And then going back to something you mentioned about back-breaking plays, it's sort of bad for the Pelicans that we had 2 different ones, because I was thinking about the Shai 3. He goes 1 of 5 from 3 tonight, but he has that one where it looks like Ingram's just locking him down, and he takes a step-back 3 towards the Thunder's bench, and it just felt super deflating for the Pelicans crowd and their team. And the Thunder ended up going on a 9-0 run because Lu Dort makes 2 in a row right after.
Back breaking twice is not ever good. It's not good to break your back even one time, but especially not twice. Now, this game clearly went the Thunder's way as they shoot 47% from 3 again. I think that their style of play, and it's tough because they've only had one opponent, and it's been the 8th seed who is hurt, but I think their style of play really does translate to the postseason. It goes back to whenever we were talking before, that at the end of the regular season, yes, like the game slows down a little bit, but even if it's not actualized steals or turnovers, it's going to be deflections and like possession enders that way, to where you're scrambling and you got to throw a grenade up there at the very end. But the Thunder have had these high turnover games, and I think that some of that's the Pelicans and some of that is also the Thunder's defense. But the Pelicans turn it over 20 times. The Thunder get out and run for 21 fast break points. So not like a huge fast break game. Some of those turnovers were, of course, offensive fouls. But you live with the second chance points to go dominate every other asset of this game, an aspect of this game. The Pelicans had 15 second chance points, and the Thunder shot 48, 47, and 69% from the floor, from the free throw line. Not a very nice night at the charity stripe, but it was a nice night for the Thunder overall. How do you feel about their style of play now 3 games into the postseason?
Well, like you said, it is just one team that they've played, but their process is it's the same no matter what happens. Like, you can see them, they're more successful on the fast break. I think that's just sort of traditional basketball ideology, is that if you go faster, defenses aren't going to be set up. It's going to be easier to score. But the thing is with the Thunder, whether they're in transition or they're in their half-court sets, it's a lot of the same stuff. It's just the speed that they're going into starting that action. So I think that they're so sold on this identity of how they want to play, and it's been working so far this season, that I just don't really see them getting shaken off of that, like we've seen some teams do, where it's like, oh, this doesn't work anymore, we're going to start panicking. It feels like even when they hit those dry spells, they're just like, it's going to turn around. And we saw it in game 1, and then these 2 games here in 2 and 3, where the offense was really in a slog, the shooting was really bad, and they said, we like the shots we're getting, we're going to keep on this path, and you see how it worked out for them.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that this game went the way of the Thunder, obviously very, very early, in the sense of whenever it did go off for them to retract that. What was encouraging about this Thunder team is, I'm not going to edit that out, but that should have been edited out. What's encouraging about this Thunder team is that even in games now twice where they didn't have their A game or their fastball, especially out of the gate in this one. Now, they eventually rounded into form, but out of the gate in this one, they did not have their A game offensively, but they could use their defense to dig in and buy them time. And if that defense can buy you time against good teams, then you really are always going to be in the game. And once you're always in the game and you have a guy like Shai, who's back-to-back top 5 in MVP this year, top 3 in MVP, you have a guy like Chet and J-Dub and the rest of this crew, there's no team that I look at, even the mighty Nuggets, even the mighty Celtics, there's no team that I look at and say that there's just no chance that the Thunder would beat them. I think that those 2 teams specifically, I would pick them over the Thunder, but there's still a chance, and it would be a dogfight each way. Now 3 games into the series, and we both agree that the series is over, so that they're at least going to get to the second round. What's your evaluation of this team?
I think they've been really good. I want to see them get tested a little bit more, where they get down big and see how they climb out of it. But I think one thing that you can take away from this series is Shai hasn't played extremely well or had one of those just Shai games, like signature ones, and they're up 3-0. And looking down the pipeline, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see another better one-on-one defender matchup for Shai. So it feels like it's going to get better, because, I mean, you look at Kawhi is not looking like himself at all. Paul George is not looking like the defender that we've seen in the past, and then you just keep going down the line. So I think that there is a bump that's coming with Shai that's just sort of on the horizon.
Well, we'll do another podcast in a better environment. But any last thoughts on this game?
Let's see here. The Pelicans, like I said earlier, if the Thunder can get out early, I think that's the big thing, is just putting it away early. Don't give them any hope, because this team, like we saw earlier, they are kind of looking for an excuse to be done, I would say, just with how gassed physically and mentally they look. So if the Thunder can come out extremely hard, like playing like closing five basketball to start this game, I think that they can get out running and really just sort of close the book on this game.
We'll see it.
Series.
We'll see how it goes on Monday. Michael, thank you for joining us. Until later tonight, whenever we record a real pod, be good to one another.